Welcome to this episode of the Wealth Movement. Are you a trailblazing founder of a family owned business? Your blood, sweat, and tears, no doubt, have now put you and your enterprise and your family on the map. Now it's time to pass on your legacy to the next generation. But are they ready for this monumental responsibility? Or perhaps you're the next generation, eager to leave your mark on the family business, but you're struggling to find the space and the confidence you need to voice your ideas and opinions. Maybe you're someone within the family enterprise apprehensive about inheriting a business you've never experienced, and the mere thought of failing your family makes you nauseous. See, transitioning a family business from one generation to another is a delicate and complex, often more than most families realize. Unfortunately, they often only realize these complexities and difficulties when it's too late. That's why planning and preparation are so crucial. See, you're passing on more than just wealth. You're passing on a business, a responsibility to your family, to your clients, to your customers, and society that relies on your support. In today's episode, we have a special guest. Chris Yonkers is a certified family business advisor who specializes in navigating the intricate and unique aspects of being related and owning a business together. Whether you're part of the first, second, third, fourth, or even fifth generation in a family business, passing on your legacy and maintaining family wealth growth requires resilience, discipline, and knowledge that may not be immediately apparent. So stay tuned as we dive into this insightful episode packed with wisdom and practical advice. If you're new to this podcast, thank you for tuning in. And be sure to subscribe to our channel and get the latest alerts for when the next episode goes live. Your support means more than you know and keeps me going to continue seeking the knowledge, information, tools, and resources to share with all of you so that you can live a truly wealthy life. Thank you for joining the Wealth Movement, and I hope you enjoy this episode with Chris Yonkers.
So that they can truly step into the higher level essence of their truth, not what their parents say they should be, or society says that, whatever that is, right? And for us.
Hey, Chris. So, welcome to the Wealth Movement podcast. I appreciate you being on here today.
Thanks for having me on, Chris. I appreciate it, man.
Yeah, no, it's truly an honor. I think I, after going through your bio, looking at your website, and just connecting with you previously, I feel like we have kind of very similar visions, similar overlap. So I'm excited to get into that with you and talk about really what you do for business and how you help families and business owners specifically. But before
Mhm.
we kind of jump into that, just kind of want to ask, today, what are you excited about today, Chris? What got you excited today?
Well, I'm most excited about our trip to Grand Cayman in a couple weeks, if you're
Ah,
asking what I'm most
yes.
excited about. Yeah. So yeah, we're just sent out this dinner reservation stuff, the concierge and whatnot. We go to Grand Cayman every December as a family. We don't go during Christmas. We go like the first week of December just to kind of detach and plan for next year as like a little retreat.
Oh,
And um, we've been doing that we took a year off during the pandemic, but we've been doing it for better part of the last 9 years. So yeah,
oh, nice. That's awesome. It's something to look forward to at the end of the year. I'm sure for
it is.
you, your wife, and your family, and also like you said, I like the idea because it's also kind of planning for the next year.
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah. Awesome. Awesome. And then so I like to always start with an icebreaker, Chris, and I think you might like this one. You familiar with Back to the Future?
Of course. Yeah.
Doc Brown comes to you. He says, Chris, I could take you to the future, take you to the past. Where would you want to go and why? I'm curious.
Oh, okay. Hmm. Well, that's an interesting one. I probably change my answer depending, right? So
Yeah.
I'm just gonna go with the answer that came up for me just right now. So, you could ask me another time, for a different answer. I've I've got I've got this, gun on the wall in my office. I had it framed, and I inherited it. It was carried in the boot of, one of my relatives who was in the Civil War, and he carried this gun with him, and so I it just got and he wrote an autobiography, which didn't it gave some input on in his life and whatnot, but I think it'd be really interesting to go back and, like, interview this person, um, so that I think that'd probably be, that'd be I just it being not that I really would wanna be alive then, honestly. I'm
Yeah.
happy to be alive today where we are in this world. There's so much has changed so fast though, hasn't it? Like, you just
Yes.
look at a few 100 years
Hmm.
and whoa, just in our lifetime, for me, I'm a little older than you, but I just look back at just the advent of things that occurred in my lifetime, and it's crazy how fast things change. It was a few 100 years ago, and there were still horses running around and taking people in New York City. Like, think
Yeah.
about that.
Yeah. Yeah. It's crazy, like you said, how fast things have changed and how we have, I guess, access to things a lot more easier, readily
Mhm.
available at our fingertips. We can get to places so easily. We can order food and it gets to our doorstep. I mean, my wife and I, we did that yesterday compared to, like you said, a couple 100 years ago, travel by wagon, you got to go hunt your own
Yeah,
food. It's just amazing how that time passes. And I think it's very interesting how, you want to go back and interview that relative that I love those type of things. I love kind of if we had the ability to time travel back and just see kind of what our predecessors before us, how they lived and how they came about
yeah,
that ultimately contributed to where we're at today, in
yeah,
some form or fashion.
yeah,
So I
yeah,
guess
and
that's
I think and the perspective of family business even, they're in our own DNA, all of us, we carry intergenerational trauma, things that have happened in the past that gets passed down even through epigenetics, like, it just we're not even aware of.
yes.
I think if you really truly part of my mission in family business work and working with high net worth families is to help raise their level of consciousness in regards to how they look at themselves and their lives so that they could show up differently for not only for the families, for the businesses, but also, and more importantly, for society in general. And I believe a lot of the issues that we have today in the world are driven from a place of fear and lower levels of consciousness. And so
Mhm.
that's part of the get just kind of going deep here, but that's a
No,
big
no.
part of the work that I like to do is getting to the root of what drives our definition of self and how we and who we are and how we behave and what we do.
Yeah, I think again, I think that's kind of why we connect so easily because I share a lot of the same feeling. Learning about psychology and how people view money and how we use money. A lot of that, like you said, I feel like we learn a lot in our childhood, and
Yeah,
that translates a lot into adulthood. So jumping into it, right? You are a certified family business advisor, right? You
yeah,
deal with uh, families, business owners, and I was going over I think there are your four pillars, I think, if I'm not mistaken, but well-being,
yeah,
harmony, family business
yeah,
continuity, and transition. It's, you just touched on something very brief, and I'd love to have you go in a little bit deeper in talking about intergenerational trauma and kind of how that affects who we are and how we go about making decisions in life, personally, financially, and just
yeah.
looking ahead in the future?
Yeah, well, so I'll give you an example of where, so I as part of the work that we do with families, when we're working with the next gen, oftentimes the family and the business is looking for how do we develop this person and where can they sit? And then not even quite frankly, Chris, I wish they were asking where they could sit because I think sometimes they're just deciding where to put somebody in a seat.
Yeah.
And we have a hard enough time in corporate America. I worked in the Fortune 500 company in the leadership realm for over 20 years. And I saw this in Fortune 500 too. Someone does a good job in sales and then we move them into sales management and they suck. And it's like, there wasn't, Marcus Buckingham talked about that 20 years ago when he wrote the book, First Break All the Rules, when he talked about the premise behind like, person's an amazing housekeeper doesn't mean you put them at the front desk
Right.
just because they're in the hotel. But oftentimes folks were looking for where they can put someone and they're not really looking at the essence of their strengths and profile. But regardless, so we do a 360. And in the process of the 360, we're looking at how does that person show, and the one we use is, I'll also say, is uniquely designed and licensed for family business. And so we're looking at family business the dynamics in the family. We're looking at relationship from that family member to the board, if there's a board. We're looking at all those pieces outside of just how they show up and do their job. And that person they also weigh in on themselves. And then we look for the gaps in regards to what do you believe you're good at that everyone else says you're maybe not good at, and blind
Mhm.
spots and things along that line. But most importantly, what ends up happening is that it lays it's a mirror. It's multiple mirrors. It could be 15, 18 mirrors around someone to reflect back what other people are observing in
Mhm.
regards to how we're showing up and what we're doing. And that reflection, the behavior is not really to be judged. It's like this is just where we're at.
Yeah.
Now there's opportunity here is where can I grow and how do I develop priorities out of this? Now, we had done one recently for a family business member, and the team that this person manages had said, like, I'm not getting a lot of developmental coaching. I'm not getting a lot of feedback. In fact, my yearly reviews aren't really occurring on a yearly
Mhm.
basis. And I'm feeling a little lost in my own career development. Now, I believe that this person cares a lot about me. It's not that. It's just
Yeah.
they're not spending any time helping me innovate and move forward in my future. Now, a common family business advisor or a common coach or a common consultant or whatever term you want to use would say, well, you need to do these. This is really important. And this is why you need to do them. And this is how to do them. And this is, here's the process. But they're not getting to why they aren't doing them.
Mhm.
They're
Mhm.
not doing them because it's not because no one ever told them they should do it. That wasn't the case.
Yeah.
So you say, okay, well, why does that happen? Well, how we look and define ourselves and how we look has a mirror reflection back out, right? So like
Mhm.
what's going on? Well, we in our, on our at our company, what we'll do is we want to get to what does this person truly believe about themselves? Well, this person actually is has a very high level. We all have an inner critic, but their inner critic's has got a megaphone. Like they're a
Yeah.
very strong inner critic. And what's happening is that also this person avoids confrontation, doesn't like having difficult conversations, as because they all internally their self-esteem, self-worth, self-love, self-security is operating at a level that's not ideal.
Yeah.
And if we don't work on that, Chris, it doesn't matter what we do strategically. It
Yeah.
doesn't matter what we what way we teach, modify, alter. We've got to work at the root of I am reflecting my own self-critic onto you, and quite frankly, I'm uncomfortable calling shit on you because I'm uncomfortable in my own bullshit.
Mm. Right. Yeah,
You know where I'm
yeah.
going with this?
Yeah,
So
exactly.
there's a lot there's work to be done in that space of at what point in my life did I start disvalidating my own worth and my own potential?
Mhm.
And once we work on that through deep coaching work, in some cases can be therapy, depending on the person, then we can start unlocking and releasing, and then the strategies, that's no big deal.
Yeah. Yeah, it's crazy you just, say that because I just did an estate planning seminar last week, and I talked about how, like, I feel like a lot of generational wealth, we kind of know the statistics, right? 70% gets lost from G1 to G2, 90% to G3. And a lot of that is revolving around how does a family talk about money and finances and whatnot.
Mm,
But I think also just not even just for business owners, but just everyone in general, like in the line of work that I do with planning, I think everyone goes searching for strategy, right? Just like you said, they want
right.
strategy because it's a
Yep,
quick fix solution and it's easy to find, but they don't know exactly. They're just a collector of strategies, and I feel that the 80% of where the success comes from is planning, preparation, and understanding your why, right? It sounds like you do that a lot of work with, your clients from the business owners to every person within the family. When it comes to family business, do you focus on every single family member from the ones that are very active to the ones that are maybe not so actively involved in the business? Tell me about that and what does that look
question.
like?
Well, ideally, to do the highest level of transformation, the more people you can involve from the system, the better. Now, it's not always gonna be the case, right? Typically, when a family business comes, into the periphery, especially if they're navigating a transition, it's owners, and it's family who are non-owners also, right? And then people that are in the business, there's the three-circle model,
Yeah.
and so it can be a variation of any of those 3, and ideally, we wanna work with the individuals initially so that we can coach and work with them independently, so that when we get them together collectively, they have a higher layer of safety with one another to share their truth in the room. And what typically happens otherwise is we're just going to go through the cycles of dysfunction that we have, whether lack of trust, lack of transparency, lack of vulnerability, um, what we know the meanings that we've assigned to situations that have happened in the past, whatever these things are, that will project into the conversation around whatever it is that we're dealing with, right? And
Yeah.
when it comes to money is also like you look back at the work like Napoleon Hill did with Think and Grow Rich, and
Yes.
you start studying into, how and Maxwell Maltz, who wrote what was the book that he did? Was it Psycho-Cybernetics? I'm trying to remember the name of the book he wrote. But Maxwell Maltz did this work in regards to how our self-worth shows up and validate, in regards to even like the validation of our inner self-worth, right?
Mhm.
How I look at money and myself gets anchored back into projection of how I look at myself. So think
Mm,
about that. You have someone in a family, a G4, G3 is working on estate planning, G4 starting to realize what truly they have their hands on and doesn't
yeah.
see themselves as worthy of that. What do you think is going to happen
Yeah.
down the
Yeah,
road? Right? All sorts of
exactly.
crazy cake.
Yeah, I mean, it's just reminds of the stories of the kids who grew up in wealth and they get everything handed to them, right? But you usually see
Yeah.
them going through down a dark path because maybe they had nothing to prove or they wanted to prove but had nothing to prove, and but often we hear about the stories of people who came from nothing, right? And to build everything because they proved and worked so hard. So I feel like when it comes to generational wealth building, right, a lot of families have difficulty talking about money in the first place, I think. And I think a lot of that, right, stems with how you grow up with money, if your parents talked about money at the dinner table or whatnot. For
Yeah.
those people, those families, right, that have had difficulty talking about money and they want to bring their kids into the business, because most business owners, the default is my kids will take over the business, right? And a lot of times, sometimes the kids don't want to take over the business.
Right. Absolutely.
So how do you introduce that again for someone who hasn't had that thought process of, "Oh, I need to do this work in order to get my kids in." Like, And how
Yeah.
early should they start that?
Yeah. Well, I think it all starts right away in
Mhm.
relationship to how we, as parents, we are constantly setting an example or illustration to our kids, right? So I can, we're parents, and our daughter is, how we think and feel about money, how we manage money, how we talk about money is already getting formatted and programmed
Yeah.
into how she'll look at and what she'll think and believe about money, whether it be
Yeah.
scarcity, whether it be abundance, whether it be respect, any of these things, right? So we want
Yeah.
to enhance our own consciousness in regards to, I'd run anyone through, even a parent, through an exercise of, what do I believe about money
Mhm.
for
Yeah.
ourselves? Like,
Yes.
I've got to, I want to develop my kids. But first, I gotta get perhaps I need to clean up my own shit too. There's
Right.
always a possibility that perhaps what I think and believe, maybe it's, what do I believe? And then where did that come from?
Mhm.
And then how do I know that's true? These questions that we can ask ourselves to kind of validate or disvalidate the what it is, the premise behind, this thing called we call money, right?
Yeah.
And it's got a lot of emotion to it, a lot, and it's something that's been passed on unconsciously and different, and also different societies look at it a little differently than others too, in regards to when I work with people in different parts of the world, in relationship to how it might show up in their culture. But regardless, what do I think and believe for myself? And then what mindfully do I want to instill into my family in relationship to what that is? And if someone I'm working with a family right now who's I'm working with, a 4th generation in a, multinational company, and G4 is not involved with the business. G3, of all G3, only one family member is. So there's a bit of disconnect from the business for this G4, and so that we wanted to create that. The project is really around this family council for this generation, and then stewardship. Stewardship. Well, the first part of the project is that we defined it in regards to a group. What's this mean? How do I know when I caring
Mhm.
for something, and why do I want to care about it? Why does it matter? Why is it important collectively? And that premise behind caring for something that's not necessarily mine, even if I get
Mhm.
ownership of it. What if I looked at it as like I was like, let's just say I have a home, a beautiful home on a lake, and it's been in the family for generations. And I've got kids, and I can see in my mind, moving my mind, the experience I had as a kid. And I'd like to be able to have that for my kids. And then how can I help them understand that perhaps you're going to take care of this house for
Mhm.
your kids and your
Mhm.
kids' kids. And what stewardship is the opportunity to cultivate and care for an entity that can provide not only for me, but also to create opportunity for others
Yeah.
generations forward. And it changes the psychology in regards to now it's not about me. It's the responsibility that I have to collectively do what's best for the greater good or for the whole, for an organization or for the overall family. And I think, also I also look at money and lessons around money as also in reflection in regards to how we look and validate and value our own and our worth
Mhm.
too, right? In that regard. So, and I'm kind of giving a pretty broad answer to your question, but these are things that I would ask folks to think
Yeah,
about.
I think it's key. Like you said, it involves a lot of deep self-reflection and a lot of vulnerability. And I guess where I would say you or people maybe having some obstacles, sorry, is just being vulnerable in the first place, right? Figuring out, first of all, why did I build this business? Obviously for money, but I wanted to do something for the community, be something different. And what do I want to then pass on to my children? How do I do it best? And one of the things that I think is important, right, is having a family mission statement and family values. Tell me about that, like, as far
Mm,
as
yeah.
that work, and is that something that families should develop early on? And then, obviously, I feel like it'll keep getting modified, and then, of course, having the entire
Yes.
family contribute to it. What are your thoughts on that?
Yeah. Yeah. So it's a living it's like other things. It's like what we call
Yeah.
a living document. Now, a document's only living if we keep it alive,
Right. Exactly.
not not build it and file it away,
Yeah.
right? And I think building in time and practice to reconnect with whatever it is that we're building, right? So, like, meaning that do we start a family meeting with
Mhm.
that? Do we start, a board meeting with that? Whatever that might be, that makes sense for that family. But in essence, what we're looking to do is anchor in what makes us different from
Mhm.
another family. What's our uniqueness in regards to us and how we define us and what we hold as sacred
Mhm.
collectively. And then so that we can be conscious of protecting that going forward, that this is who we are and this is how we be in essence, like if you look at an organization, when you work on do core values in an organization, you're helping people answer the question,
Mm.
how do we behave? That's what core values do is they provide a roadmap for behavior, an allowance of that, right? And also it creates something to measure against in regards to, am I living in integrity to what I say that I value or
Yeah.
I don't value? So yes, absolutely. No matter where you're at, if you don't have a mission, what reason of like,
Yeah.
why am I here? Mission answers, why am I here? Vision is, where am I going? And then core values is, how do we behave? What do we hold as sacred vessels that we want to protect collectively? And you shouldn't have 10 core values. 3 to 5
Mhm.
is good. 10 is too many. And what I found is once you get in the realm of 10, you probably could summarize them. They're probably similar, that you could find a word and
Yeah.
build some buckets to hold those core components, right? So like for our family, health and well-being are one of our top 3 core values. So like that's
Yeah.
really important to us. So how do we how do we assess that? Well, we assess that by how we behave. How do we behave? Well, we follow and practice we've surrounded ourselves with a really good functional medicine team and a
Mm.
well-being team. And then also we educated ourselves, but then additionally, we do it in a way where you ask my daughter what she eats, she'll be able to tell you what the roadmap is to what she
Mhm.
puts in her body and why, based upon our core value of health and
Yeah.
well-being.
No, no,
Does that
absolutely,
make
that makes
sense?
100% sense because, again, like you said, it serves as the template, and gives you something to grade yourself against and make sure that the things that you're doing, the actions that you're taking are rooted and aligned with those core values, that mission statement, and the vision. I think it's important. And so I'm curious then, working with
Yep.
families, right? You have maybe different the patriarch, the ones that built the wealth, and then the next gen. Who
Yeah.
who should start it? Start that if they don't have it.
Yeah. It's a great question. Yeah, it's a great question. So we get everyone together, and typically the core values, the roadmap of the core values have already been laid by the founders in a family business. Regardless, it's typically been the tradition of who we are and what we hold sacred is already evident. It's a matter of digging it up if we're not
Okay,
conscious of what it
I see.
is. Now, the next question may ask, well, how's the next generation get tied to that? Well, once we get clarity and what are core values for us, and typically, not always, in many cases, family businesses, family is one of the core
Mhm.
values that they hold. And if you interview, when we start working with a family in our discovery process, we'll interview the organization because we want to understand the culture, we understand the leadership, we understand the organizational health of the organization. Because if we're going to plot a course
Yeah.
of where we're going to go, it's really helpful for us all to know where we're
Yes.
at, right? It's a good time to do a check in on that. And So through that work, you'll find out, I say families is like people work in a family business that hold things you'll hear that hold family as a core value will be like, man, when my kids got a baseball game at 3 o'clock on a Wednesday afternoon, I can leave and no one gives me many different, I know what my job is and I get it done, but there's flexibility built into our schedules to get time off, to be at important family events because that's respectable
Yeah.
here in this environment. Right, so that's something you would be a mere reflection of what's occurring there. So getting the that those core values bubbled up and people understanding what does it mean to embody them is another part of the discussion. It's one thing to say something. Embodiment
Yeah.
is owning it, right? In our psychology, in our emotional context, and what it was, what we do, and how we behave. The next part of that exercise with the next gen is, well, what would be an emerging core
Mm.
value? What would be something that we would want to talk about that we might want to consider? So I was working with a family business, been in business for 125 years, this past year, and one of the emergent core values that they decided was well-being. Well-being is not been something that's, you know, what let we and I care about my own mental and
Mhm.
emotional well-being. How can we become an organization that supports that
Yeah.
at a higher level? Maybe we provide resources for that type of thing. Another one they wanted to put on was innovation, and they're in a innovation is not something that their industry has really truly been. I'm not going to reveal their industry, but their industry is a industry that's been around a long time and a bit
Mm.
behind the times. So how do I, so that there's this idea of building some curiosity around how do we create going forward is also something that they wanted to put on the table. So emerging core values allows you to integrate new ideals that we might want to start adopting going forward and still maintain who we are at the
Yeah.
same time.
Yeah. I mean, I love that, and I was just thinking, yeah, I'm sure you've come across this with family businesses. You like I said, you had the patriarch. Has there been many times where they just don't wanna hear what the younger gen has when it comes to innovation because maybe they're stuck in their ways, and how do you help them overcome that? Because I see the only way for this to be successful, right, is that everyone has, uh they feel comfortable enough to make that contribution to the family mission, right? And if the kids or the younger generation don't feel comfortable enough, they might not even speak their full mind and what they think can help elevate the business to the next level.
Yeah.
How do you overcome that? Is there a lot more work then that's done with the original generation that built it?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's part of the reason that we like to do the private work before getting people
Makes sense.
together to do
Yes.
this other work is to prepare them so that when we get, see I find there's a lot of other advisors and consultants, they start here and they haven't done any work one-on-one with folks to prepare them for this conversation. So then when you end up is you
Yeah.
show up in a room
Yeah.
filled with people with limiting beliefs, challenges, family dynamics that are causing them to behave in a way that isn't
Hmm.
truly authentic to where they're at.
Yes. Yeah.
Because they've already figured out the ways to manipulate one another and they've
Right.
mastered the crafts, right?
Exactly.
And they continue to do so. They're gonna do so to keep themselves safe, especially if they feel threatened at
Yeah.
any point in time.
Yeah, I mean, I'm sure you've seen this show, right? Succession on HBO? You have
I've
not?
not watched it.
Oh my
I know
gosh,
I know the
I
show.
thought you would have
I've never
watched
seen
it.
it. It's like what? It's like 7, 8 is it like 7 episodes
Uh,
or 7 seasons, I
something
mean,
li
something like
so,
that? How many
I think it's
seasons?
4 or 5 seasons.
Yeah, so my wife and I we're watching 2nd
Oh,
season
okay.
Lupin,
Yeah, good show.
Murders in the Building, like, we're definitely follow shows and love watching shows, but part of the challenge is that, um and the Ozarks, was it
Yeah,
called The
uh-huh,
Ozarks? Is that
that's
the
a
name of the
really
show?
good
That
one.
was a really good. So that one we were able to get through, but when you haven't started something earlier in, and then you see how much is left, and then we only have 30 to 45 minutes a
Yeah.
night to watch stuff, it's like, whoa, this is gonna take me about
When you
6
start
months. So
calculating
anyway,
that.
I think success is in
Yeah.
that category, but regardless, it doesn't mean that we
Yeah.
won't get through it. But I'd like to see it at some point. But yeah, I that's the answer to your
Oh, okay.
question of
No,
why I
I
haven't
only
watched it.
bring it up because, it's, I'm sure you know the premise of the show, but it's talking about generational wealth, and you got the patriarch, the guy that built it, and the whole entire series is about who is that going to go to. And he has 4 different kids. The
Yeah,
one that's the most active to the one that is, like, no interest in the business. So it's just interesting, with our conversation and what we're talking about, how
yeah,
like, as I was watching the show, I was like, "Man, that just seems like real life right there with a lot of families, especially wealthy families, what they go through, and just, what work needs to be done so that the children can feel safe," because that's why I love the show, because every child was different, and they all had something they either wanted to prove or didn't need to prove. Um, I think you'll enjoy it, basically, is what I'm saying.
oh yeah, I don't doubt that at all.
Yeah. Y
I don't
Yeah.
doubt
No,
that at all.
so going through, working with I work with, business owners and trying to educate them on succession and exit planning, right? And one of the important things that we talk about is, I think that often gets overlooked, is again values, and if you're doing a family passing of that business, um, how important pre-planning is, right? And how important it is to get the
Yeah,
children involved. What are some things that business owners who are looking to transition in the next, 5 years or so, that you think they should be starting now if they haven't already?
yeah. Well, goes back to the premise of when do you
Hmm.
start to plan an exit of a business or the day you start a
Yes.
business, right? So that's the premise behind that. I'm sure people have heard. So regardless of where you are in the context of time, having clarity in how you look at transition is really important. And I have, in the last 18 months, I've worked with 2 people in businesses who both got diagnosed with cancer, who both passed away. And neither one had they're in their
Wow.
50s.
Yes.
Okay. So neither one, let me tell you, had any no, there was nothing in the environment to even foretell. And there was a situation with one of them where I got, in essence, pulled in to help with the succession
Mm.
process in like more of an active way than just an advisory way. And when you are in a situation where you know time's not on your side anymore, and it's kind of like you walk into the kitchen and the stove's on fire.
Mhm.
You don't have a lot of time to sit back and go, okay, what's the best fucking way to do this right now?
Mhm.
Excuse my French. Like, how do I go about things? Do
Right.
I,
Yeah.
you know what I'm saying? Like, so you might throw water on something you shouldn't, because perhaps you're not mindfully thinking it through. And creating clarity in a vision and working with a team of a really good wealth planner like yourself, working with a team of really good estate planner, an accountant. I have a meeting tomorrow with a large business, and I'm actually their financial team's coming in as well. And some of what they have done up till now hasn't been, I'm not going to say holistically thought through. And there's, some major tax
Mm.
changes coming up here. The end that was at
Mhm.
2025. So like there's things that, man, oh man, good thing they're
Yeah.
thinking about this now, because if they waited too much longer, they wouldn't be able
Yes.
to do anything about it. And it's a lot of money that's gonna go the wrong way. Why give more away
Exactly.
than you need to? So, the first order of business is to get a team around you. Ideally, someone who understands family business advising space, someone that's like really gets it holistically, not just someone who gets it once. A lot of folks swim in one lane. I would advise working with a team like ours, where someone's going to look at it 360 and then pull in someone like Chris and pull in like, so that all these people can come into the room and you say, hey, where are we at? And what don't we
Mhm.
have tied down?
Mhm.
That's the first
Yeah.
order, right? What don't we have keeping insurance on? What don't we
Mhm.
have tied down? Because
Yeah.
that's really important. And then additionally, what are our plans of something like tomorrow or the next day? And that's the other thing I see oftentimes in that 5-year window is like, okay, who's going to be next? Do we know oh yeah, I know who they are. Okay. Are we
Mhm.
developing them? Well, we got time. Bullshit. You
Exactly.
don't have time. You got 5 years. That's not a lot of time to
Yeah.
develop someone. I'm sorry. It's not. Especially if you're gonna put them in an executive seat and
Yeah.
I haven't been in one before. There's a lot goes into developing that person. If you really I mean, why wouldn't you have a responsibility to the board, you have a responsibility to your family, your responsibility to your employees, your responsibility to your customers, and to society to prepare that
Mhm.
next gen leader.
Yeah.
So why aren't you? Those are the pieces that I would, that would be the top of my mind right out of
Yeah.
the gate.
Yeah. I mean, I agree. I think that's the not the problem, right? But I think everyone, I'm guilty of it sometimes, is that we just think we have time, right? And we don't control that,
Right,
right? We don't control that, and that's why I'm
right.
such a big advocate for not just financial planning, but just planning in general, right? Planning for life. I think we talked about it, but my dad, suffered a stroke at 55 and he had a business and there was no pre-planning done, no
Yeah,
planning for a stroke. So I think the reality is people have to understand if you haven't done this work, all the work that you've done to build this empire is going to go away if you haven't done the protection part.
yeah,
Protect what you've built, and don't think that you got
right,
tomorrow to do that. To your point, developing the next generation is not just a moral obligation for the family, but it's also to society because again, you're contributing to society, you're contributing to businesses, and other businesses are relying on you, and it's a domino effect. And I think that's where holistic, truly understanding the entire piece of everything of the family and just how it all contributes is so important. So thank you for sharing that. I share the same exact sentiment,
yeah.
with what you just spoke with. Um, so, as we're kind of finishing up here, I'm curious for immigrants of wealth, right? The ones that created the wealth.
Mm.
What's with all of your work that you've done, what's one piece of advice that you think is important for them to be aware of?
So the question is if an immigrant generated
Oh, no, I'm
wealth
sorry.
coming
Or
into,
or
let's say,
like
they came in.
immigrants of wealth, right? Not necessarily a immigrant to America, but someone who is the one. I like to call them the neo, the one that builds the wealth for the family, right? Propels a family to the
Yeah,
next level of of for that
yeah,
family.
yeah. My answer's still gonna be
Yeah,
somewhat the
yeah,
same though, right? Um, yeah, because, 'cause I think of I have a high deep respect for my in-laws who came over, and it's not your question, but
yeah.
I'm gonna go there. Who came over from, Poland and Lithuania when they were kids, different times, the husband and wife, but they came in, so they didn't speak any English at all, came in, right,
Mhm.
to Ellis Island, blah, 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 blah. Both families settled in the Chicago area, had nothing, and then had
Yes.
to
Yeah.
build up, right? So they came from and for a better tomorrow, and they created opportunity. The next gen, my mother-in-law and father-in-law, well, I should say that their parents did that, so they came over as kids, and then but they watched their parents do these things, right? So they got some things instilled in them, and one thing that I see missing though from the fabric of oftentimes is this idea, and not as an idea, it's the fundamental of having resilience
Mhm,
and
mhm,
building in
mhm.
resilience. What ends up happening though is that when we end up creating some level of wealth, and we have the same challenge at times because my daughter grows up. I I have a 9-year-old. I'm older than my parents were when they had me. And so I've got more resources now at this point in time in my life, and we've been very blessed with the business that we have, my wife and I own. And there's not, I can provide a lot of really cool
Yeah.
things, right? Like, hey, gonna go private horseback riding every week, no big, like things like that, right? Like we
Yeah.
just do stuff. But I never would have ever considered some of the
Yeah.
stuff that we do years ago, and because I didn't have the means to do it. And so there's an opportunity there for me not to build any level of resilience into my daughter because it's easy to provide and even at times
Yes.
do things for her. And I see this in my businesses oftentimes that someone forgets somewhere that they're, that the roadmap that they follow, it's almost like they don't want to have someone else have to pay
Mhm.
the pain that they did or the
I see what you're
sacrifice,
saying.
whatever it
Yeah.
is. And we alleviate, and we start going down this wrong, I call the wrong path because we built no resilience and no self-responsibility to
Yeah.
advocate for that person. And then that creates, so to me, if I'm, I am one of the advisors who recommends 9 out of 10 times, not 10, but 9 out of 10 times that your family goes and works somewhere else first before they come in and work in the
Mm.
family business. Go see what it's like to
Yeah.
work for someone else. Go go have to have report to a boss because you're not gonna no, go where you're not gonna give
Yeah.
any favoritism. And I'm not gonna give you anything really to get
Yeah.
started. Go figure it out. Go
Yeah.
make it happen. Here for you, but I'm gonna be your
No,
financial
exactly.
provider. And the more we can do that, the better, and it's hard.
Mhm.
It's not easy. The better we're going to be helping that person build that fabric because we having resilience is really gonna be important for anyone that wants to have sustainability, because no matter what, you will have to make difficult decisions and you will have challenges, regardless of the business, regardless of the size,
Mhm.
regardless of the wealth. You will have challenges, you will have problems, and you'll have to make decisions, and that's gonna
Yeah.
come for everyone. So what kind of support can you get through those? Yes, like a team, and also, how can you help that person develop and grow to be the person to
Yeah.
consciously
I
navigate
love
that?
that. And I was just curious if you don't mind expanding, and I don't want you to have to go too detailed, but like, for example, you were mentioning with your daughter, right? Private horseback lessons, something that maybe you didn't have growing up. How do you, for like, I have a niece, right? We take her out to Disneyland and everything, things that I didn't get to do as a child. Yeah.
Fun.
How do you go about, obviously wanting to do those things, but also displaying the message of, hey, we've worked hard for this. I want you to make sure that you realize that and you also work hard for it as you grow up, too in life. Like some of the things I've tried to my wife and I
Yeah,
tried to instill was taking her to one of the nonprofits that we're involved with and seeing kind of what that work
awesome.
does. I'm curious, you work with a lot of families. How do you do that, especially for young children growing up, right? Instilling that resilience, the right
Yeah,
message for them.
yeah, I think it's great. So, our model of the world comes from the perspectives that we've had is part of it, right? So, how can we expose our children to things like
Hmm.
world travel, to go to places where, like, are you kidding me? Like, we live in, like, this crazy ass little beautiful place in the seacoast of New Hampshire where there's not I have to go to Portland, Maine, or to Manchester, New Hampshire, or to Boston in order for to see, like, why are these people tenting out? Oh, no, they're not tenting
Yeah.
out, that's their homes. Like, this,
Yeah.
like, like,
Yeah.
seriously, right? Like, this is legit. And so because she doesn't see that in her
Hmm.
community every day, she goes to a private school, like, it's not part of her. So there's, I think, the opportunity to expose our children to the more, I believe travel is a
Hmm.
huge driver. The more worldly that we could help them become, the better in that regard. And then also how we show up and respect money and make decisions around that. And then additionally, where do we cause them to start like, well, if you want that, you're gonna have to save for it. You're gonna have to work for it. You're gonna have to, I mean, I chose this year for the first time, in, probably 15 years that I cleaned up leaves. Haven't done
Mhm.
it 15 years. And part of the reason I did that was I like, "You know what? Let's do this
Mhm.
ourselves." Like, we had a housekeeper going into COVID, and then she stopped during COVID. We never replaced her. Why? It's not because I like cleaning the house, but Grayson partakes
Yeah.
in cleaning the house. It's part of her work.
Yeah.
It's what we do to live in the home, to show respect for
Yeah.
our home and our space.
Love that.
Right? We're gonna rake she helped me rake it's like, it's not part of your normal duties at home, but I'd like to help me rake the leaves. Okay, spend an hour with me, I'll give you $10. 15. I'm like, "No,
Mhm.
10
Mhm.
or no." And she's like,
Yeah.
and so she did it. She hung in line for an hour for so, but, like, helping our goal as parents is to build independence within
Mhm.
another human being. That c resilience is part of
Yeah.
that package, right? Not doing things for them. The more we can stop and let them this is really,
Mhm.
really hard, but let
Yeah.
them fail. Let them fail and experience their failure and not condone them or judge them for the failure. Just allow them to have the experience of
Yeah.
failure in itself. I've got a mentor of mine who's owns a family office, and he's got money set aside for his kids that they can start a
Mm.
business. And it's not a
Mhm.
little bit of money. And if they screw up, so be it.
Yeah.
And some people, I was in a room where he brought this up, and so we were like, "Well, it's gotta come with conditions." It's like, "Well, there are a few conditions, but" he's like, "Well, you just can't let them go do whatever they want. You gotta look at the business plan and evaluate it." And he's like,
Mhm.
"Why?
Yeah.
Why?" Like, "Well, that's irresponsible."
Yeah.
Says who?
Yeah.
"It's my money, and I'd rather have them take this $5,000,000 and blow it and
Mhm.
learn something from it. What's that
Yeah,
lesson worth to
exactly.
them?"
I think that would
You know?
be I love that because I think that's a lot more valuable than him just giving them $5,000,000 when he passes, because
That's right.
he
Nope, that's not it, and it's got
exactly.
conditions. Yeah,
Yeah,
it's pretty
and plus he
yeah,
can see that
yeah,
legacy play out.
but he's willing
Exactly,
to let
that's
it go.
huge.
He's willing to let it go as an
Yeah.
investment in them and their own ability to do something with it. It goes back to, the story in the Bible about the talents and some
Mhm.
people buried them, and, you've heard the story, I'm sure most everyone has, whether
Mhm.
you're a Christian or not, and the idea is like, what do you do
Yeah.
with what's given to you,
Yes.
right?
Yeah. Yeah, I love that. So what as we're nearing Chris, what does the journey look like, for families? Like, do they at least a lot of one-on-one work first, right, before you get the family involved, or what does that typically look like?
Well, typically, yes, if they're willing to
Mhm.
go there, right? Not everyone is. It's like you say, how many people do you wanna work
Mhm.
within a family? I have a relationship with an organization called Genetic Care, which is a health and well-being family office, international family office, and we work with high net worth families and across this continuum there, and we put individuals on a track, working with a team of over 30 experts. They won't necessarily work with 30 experts. They
Okay.
might work with 5 for a duration of 12 months, depending on what that person needs. But not everyone in the family is gonna be wanting
Yeah.
to
N
do that
exactly.
work,
Yeah.
right? So it's the ones that want to do the work, right? But you get 2, 3 people working on something, and then how does that impact the collective over time? So that's one piece of it. But, typically the journey is for us is when someone reaches out, they're they're gonna be, or they're in, or they're coming out of a consequential
Mhm.
transition of some sort, right? Either they are on the other side of it, just trying to
Mhm.
figure out what's next, or they're in it or coming into it. They know gonna be coming into it, and they wanna do it in a way that's mindfully done, that is thought out, and that, quite frankly, is holistic
Yeah.
in nature and not just overlay strategy and follow an outline and do
Yeah.
A, B, and C. They truly wanna they wanna get to the nuances of what makes
Yeah.
something work, right? And they wanna, say, and quite frankly, some of them, maybe not all of them, some of them want to be a better version of themselves
Mhm.
because of the
Mhm.
process too. They don't wanna just get to the other side. They actually wanna
Mhm.
improve who they are on the other
Yeah,
end
I'm
as
sure that's
well.
probably answer your question, probably the most rewarding thing to see, right, is that I mean, at least for me, right,
Yep.
doing kinda that holistic work and talking about tell me more about your goals, not just numbers, but why. because I feel it's when you dig down that deep, that's the discipline that they need to keep going, right? Because you can give them, like you said, A, B, and C, and maybe they'll do it for a day, and 2 days,
Right.
2 weeks, and then it'll just be by the wayside and forget about it. But if you
Yeah.
do all of that deep work,
Yeah. I mean, the deep
that could help. I mean, how do you see that? Does that help a
yes.
lot with the discipline for them to keep going the distance?
Well, when you change who you are, you can't not
Yeah,
keep that
yeah,
going. It doesn't matter, right?
yeah.
It's permanent. That's we're into transformation, and transformation is the truth of behavior change. It's part of the reason I studied NLP years ago. How do I get someone to become
Mhm.
not me so that they can truly step into the higher level essence of their truth, not what their parents say they should be or society says
Yeah.
that whatever that is, right? And for us, when looking at a succession project, how do I help the person at the helm let go? That's a whole topic in itself. And then how do I put those next gens, those other people who are rising up, how do I help them step into a higher state of the next version of themselves and heal what's been holding them back from their own
Mm,
evolution? That's where the deep work that needs
yeah.
to happen.
Oh, man, awesome. Oh, 2 more questions, I know our time is getting quick here. Uh, Favorite quote, Chris, and why?
Oh boy, oh boy. That's a good one. I like as a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. That's one that
Yeah.
comes right away. Um, that that one is from it's a proverb. It's I believe it's a proverb. It might be, or it might be another scripture, but regardless, it's out of the Bible. As a man thinketh in his heart, so is he. It's our external reality is a mere reflection of my inner
Mm,
reality, right? So
mm,
you can see that's why that
yeah,
quote resonates with me
yeah.
based upon the work that we're
Oh, I
doing.
love that. I love that. Alright, most important, how can people find you? How can they connect with you?
Yeah. So, sure, great question. So I would say first, there's a website, chrisyonker.com, CHRISYONKER.com. I have a podcast called The Secret Thoughts of CEOs. So that's another place to check in. Um, and that podcast, it does have a lot of family business topics, but other areas too that I'm passionate about, like health and well-being and mindset and discipline and things like that. And then we have an ongoing series right now that's continuing forward every about 6 weeks or so, 8 weeks tops. We do a live event on Zoom and we record them. And whoever signs up can they can attend live, ask questions. I'll have other. It's called the Family Business
Okay.
Executive Forum. So Family Business Executive Forum, they go to fambizforum.com, FAMBIZFORUM.com. There's the newest one will be there. If you can't find it, just reach out to us at my website, and you can sign up and attend. And the next one we're having, actually, regardless of when this episode hits, just to give you an idea of the kind of content, is on should I fire a
Mm,
family member and what do I do if I am approaching behavior with a family member when I'm their brother or I'm their uncle or I'm
yes.
whatever. Like how do I put the right people in the right seats and handle issues, and when is it time to separate ways, and what's the ways to go about doing that? So those are type we like to talk about. I call them elephant in the
Yeah.
room conversations. The stuff that no one wants to talk about that's always in the room that
Uh-huh.
everyone's working around. That's
Yeah,
where I like
yeah, I
to
like
go.
that. I think that's where most impact gets done, because you're talking about something that
Yeah,
is truly different. I love it. Well, I'll definitely get all of that information, Chris, from you, and also put it in the show notes for everyone as well. But I just want to thank you for your time. I really enjoyed this conversation, and I look forward to continuing to connect with you and collaborate with you, Chris. And but yes, truly, thank you so much
absolutely.
for your time.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Chris. I really appreciate it. Yeah, keep in
Bye.
touch. Okay, thanks, buddy.
Securities offered through Kestra Investment Services, LLC, member FINRA, SIPC. Investment advisory services offered through Kestra Private Wealth Services, LLC. An affiliate of Kestra is Mavin Bridge Capital, and Kestra Investment Services are not affiliated. Kestra is and Kestras do not provide tax or legal advice. The opinions expressed in this commentary are those of the author and may not necessarily reflect those held by Kestra Investment Services, LLC or Kestra Advisory Services, LLC. This is for general information only and is not intended to provide specific investment advice or recommendations for any individual. It is suggested that you consult your financial professional, attorney, or tax advisor with regard to your individual situation. Comments concerning the past performance are not intended to be forward-looking and should not be viewed as an indication of future results.